Hi, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is November 5th, and we're on page 20 in your magazines. And now, don't think of a white bear.
Too late.
Our title today is The White Bear Phenomenon. Watch out for this phenomenon. It's got an N-O-N at the end, and that is the singular form. The plural form is phenomena. And I've noticed that a lot of us native speakers now make mistakes with this. This is an irregular plural. And I have it on record because in my PhD defense, I made this mistake, saying phenomena instead of phenomenon. And then I noticed that many native speakers make the same mistake. We say phenomena when we mean phenomenon because a lot of the irregular singulars and plurals, or not singulars, a lot of the irregular plurals now are becoming regular. So we tend to make mistakes on the irregular ones. Okay, our title is The White Bear Phenomenon. And here's our article. Try not to think about your feet. Now, observe yourself over the next few minutes as you are unable to stop thinking about them. This phenomenon, known as the white bear problem, was first posited back in 1863 by Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoyevsky. In his essay, Winter Notes on Summer Impressions, he challenged readers, try to pose yourself this task, not to think of a polar bear, and you will see that the cursed thing will come to mind every minute.
Over a century and a half later, Harvard psychologist Daniel Wegner came across Dostoyevsky's passage and was inspired to investigate the matter further. Wegner designed an experiment involving different groups of subjects who were asked to think of or not to think of a white bear. When the first group of people were asked not to think of a white bear, they ended up thinking of it more than once per minute on average. Next, the same group was asked to do the same exercise, but this time to think of white bears from the very beginning. It turned out that the participants in the first group thought of the bear far more often than the other groups who had been instructed to think of white bears on purpose. Wegner coined the term ironic rebound to describe the process whereby deliberate attempts to suppress thoughts make them more likely to come to the surface.
Over the years, behavioral psychologists have come up with a variety of methods to suppress the white bears, especially ones that may affect our lives negatively. These include mindfulness and meditation, focusing on something else of interest to you, and assigning another time to think about the topic. That last sentence just hit me hard because something pretty awful happened in our family. And at that time, my son was just getting ready to take his test to get into high school here. And this terrible thing was going on. And I asked him how he dealt with it. He said, I just didn't think about it. I couldn't think about it. He was putting it off for another time. And that's how he dealt with it, and he did well on the test.
Interesting. So he was able to, even at such a young age, to say, I will think about this, but not at this moment.
I'm too busy and this is too important. So that phrase just really hit me. I mean, I have a personal experience with that.
That's interesting. As a younger person, I know personally I was not able to do that. Today, I'm able to better focus on blank. So what helped me sometimes, for example, if you wake up early and let's say you wake up 2 hours before you normally have to, and your brain is like, you just wake up and you have a busy mind.
Yep.
So what I realized is that I could focus on thinking of empty, thinking of literally think of nothing, think about nothing. Mm-hmm. And that helps me. But when I was younger, that was almost impossible for me. I could not escape white bears.
That's meditation, and that's a skill you have to learn. It doesn't usually come naturally. You need to discover it somehow. I had a similar experience around high school, and that was I had read something about imagining a flame burning inside of you.
That sounds terrible.
It was at first. It was kind of hot. And then I also imagined my soul just coming up above my head, that I'm rising above everything. And both of those worked. So as long as you're focusing on something else, not letting these thoughts invade and bother you, you can usually get over something, especially with your soul rising above you. You look down on stuff and it seems kind of trivial and unimportant. So I did something similar, actually. And I think everybody needs to learn this skill.
I wonder if people were to describe the way they focus on mindfulness or meditation, what is the object they focus and fixate upon? I wonder if there are correlations. I wonder if there are relationships between those things, or are there perhaps deeper, more psychological thinking? For example, you focus on the flame.
At first, and it got a little hot, and that's why I changed it.
Right. And for me, thinking of the emptiness, thinking what is empty, what is nothing, and just focusing on that. For me, that was helpful. And I wonder if there aren't a wide variety of those things in order to control the white bear.
That would be a really interesting study. Did you think of that yourself, or had you read about meditation or Buddhism before?
So my wife is a very, very devout Buddhist, but to be truthful, I just needed ways to clear my head. And I just thought that I realized I can focus on one thing very, very well. So if I have a busy mind, what I would do is I just knew the way I thought, my thinking process. So I said, focus on this one thing very, very deeply. And emptiness, like white noise, something like that, just giving all my attention to that one thing was very possible for me. And so I probably just stumbled upon it. Like in many ways, like we often hear about like some people would invent the same thing multiple times throughout history. I think that's an instance of that, where anybody could kind of stumble across this if they're paying attention to what's going around them.
About how long ago was it that you learned that skill?
Maybe I was in my 20s or 30s, or maybe late 20s, I would say. Because definitely as a younger person, I had way too much energy.
You still have a lot. That's good. Okay, that's really interesting background. So let's go back again to our title, The White Bear Phenomenon. We've got white bear in quote marks. And here it means it's referring to something that somebody said about white bears before. So they're talking about something very specific, not just about white bears in general out of the blue. You know, they're referring to something somebody said about white bears and the effect it has on people.
And while we're discussing the white bear, we should also say you may have even heard of this as a pink elephant or a pink rhinoceros.
That's right.
Our younger listeners may have even heard of what's called the game, where the whole point is to not think of it. And so this is described in many ways, but the original idea was the white bear.
That's right. Pink elephant, that's something you hear pretty often. Okay, our first paragraph. Try not to think about your feet. Now, actually, I'm kind of contrary. Our teachers would often say something in class, and I'd say, but. I did it all the time. It drove most people nuts, but I had a teacher who said, well, Karen's a really good student. So some people appreciated it. And in this case, I did the same thing. What I do is I start thinking about my hands. And it's no problem. I don't think about my feet at all. I think about my hands or my shoulders. So it is possible if you've trained your mind. It's something like Chris was just describing.
Or in our last sentence here that we already read, focus on something else.
That's right. Any other thing. Okay, so not thinking about my feet. You know, my feet are not the most beautiful feet in the world, so it's very easy for me to think about something else. All right, next sentence. Now observe yourself over the next few minutes as you are unable to stop thinking about them. And my feeling when I read this is, I'm not thinking about them.
but there they are, right? So, hey, I'm not thinking about this. But in a way, isn't that like an implicit admission that you are?
Only if somebody asks me. Otherwise, I'm thinking about my hands. Okay. This phenomenon, known as the white bear problem, was first posited back in 1863 by Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoyevsky. All right, you need to know about Fyodor Dostoyevsky. When you go and study in a foreign language department, you're expecting to read a lot of American and British or English literature. But part of our own literary tradition is a lot of work by people from other countries, especially what come to mind are France, Russia, and certainly Germany. Yeah. So any literature from these three countries, especially the most famous writers, is part of our own Western tradition. And we definitely embrace Dostoyevsky.
I literally was thinking, as you were saying that sentence, I was thinking, what would three places you would say? And literally I thought, French, German, Russian.
That's right.
That tells you something where Karen and I did not discuss this. This is a core part. And even as a history major in university, and I didn't even focus on European history, I read a lot of Dostoyevsky. So it's just one of those things that if you're an educated, Western educated type of person, you will come across this.
I want to throw something in about Dostoyevsky so you have an idea of why he's so important. In the East, you have the theory of yin and yang. So that is English too. I'm not cheating. And yin is the dark side of things, we often like to focus on the bright side and this will work, this will have all kinds of good effects and this is a great idea, etc. There's always something dark behind it, and you always have to keep that in mind. We like to avoid it because it's not pleasant to deal with. Well, Dostoyevsky deals in that dark stuff, and you need to know that part of yourself, and one way to get to know it better is to read about somebody else's dark side.
On a related note, while we're talking about the word phenomenon, it's a useful word, but it is used in special ways. So a phenomenon is a fact or a unique situation that we know exists, but we might not understand why or how it comes to be. So be careful. This is one of those weird words where it has a rather specific usage, but it's hard to define. So think of like an iceberg. Icebergs, like we kind of know it could break off a bigger iceberg and now it floats around in the ocean. But where did that original iceberg come from, right? So we would describe an iceberg phenomenon.
It's kind of a generalization about facts in the world. Right. It's something like a theory. Another thing to pay attention to here is the verb posit. To posit means to say that something exists. Assume that this exists. I will put forth this theory because I believe this exists. I am positing a theory. So that's a kind of academic word that's really good to know. It's the same posit as in deposit or position or pose. All of those have the same root. It just means to put. So you put this idea out. Okay, let's go on to our next sentence. In his essay, Winter Notes on Summer Impressions, he challenged readers, try to pose yourself this task, not to think of a polar bear, and you will see that the cursed thing will come to mind every minute. Now, Chris and I had a short discussion about how to say cursed or cursed. Now, both of them are possible. When you put it in front of a noun, we usually will put an extra syllable on it, the cursed thing. And sometimes we'll put a little accent mark over the E and ED to show that we pronounce it as a separate syllable, a grave accent. It goes from up to down. The cursed thing, the cursed thing, however, are both okay.
Yeah, I would say that cursed sounds better, definitely. In fact, I even wrote it out with an additional ED just to see it in my mind that I know that is wrong. It's just one of those little tricky things that happens in English.
And also the same thing happens with similar words with ED. For example, beloved. He's widely beloved, but my beloved friend. When you put it in front of a noun, usually we pronounce ED as a separate syllable. So he, that is, the he here is Fyodor Dostoyevsky. He says, try to do this. I want you to not think about a polar bear. And then most people will find that they cannot get this image of a polar bear out of their head at all.
All right, let's continue on to paragraph 2. Over a century and a half later, Harvard psychologist Daniel Wegner came across Dostoyevsky's passage and was inspired to investigate the matter further.
All right, so this is much, much later that somebody stumbled upon this. They're just reading Dostoyevsky, and this one challenge really made the person think. This reminds me of something said to me by a former colleague at Taiwan University. He was trying to advise a student who was in our department, who said, I'm thinking about going into psychology. And my colleague says, I bet you will learn more about human psychology from literature than you would learn in the psychology department. And that is really true. I also thought of taking psychology, but there's a lot of lab work, a lot of theories, there's a lot of abnormal psychology. But in literature, people are just describing what they see and feel and think. You often get more insights from literature where there are fewer requirements that you have to follow the scientific method. You just get records of all kinds of things that have happened to people that people have thought about. So this person, this psychologist, saw this in Dostoyevsky and thought, I think I should look into this. This is interesting.
Psychology gets lots of love, but I've always been more interested in sociology. So instead of like in one person's condition, psychology, you think about everyone's condition and the way all humans act in groups. This is sociology.
And that's really important. I'm reading a book now called Tribe. And our existence really relies on other people. We are tribal beings. Okay, let's go on to the next sentence.
Wegner designed an experiment involving different groups of subjects who were asked to think of or not to think of a white bear.
and we can kind of guess what the outcome is. Everybody, I think, can understand it. This sentence is pretty straightforward. Let's go on.
Well, subject, I just want to mention, subject here doesn't mean like in English or math. Yeah, be careful here, okay? This means a person that you're studying.
Exactly. The person who is in an experiment, we're going to collect data on you. You are a subject.
Our next sentence, when the first group of people were asked not to think of a white bear, they ended up thinking of it more than once per minute on average.
Now, this is surprising enough. There's going to be a bigger surprise later in the paragraph. This is not really so surprising because if I tell you not to think of it, what else is your brain going to do but obsess over that thing?
Little kids do this.
Oh, really? Can you give me an example?
For sure. It's like, mom is hiding Christmas gifts in the closet. She always does.
Yeah.
And mom like closes the closet door or locks it or something. And there's even a joke in the famous cartoon The Simpsons. And the police officer says to his son, "Why are you so interested in my forbidden closet of mystery?" It's like, how can you not want to know what's in there?
That's brilliant. I did the same thing, and then my kids said, "Oh, they're all in the closet like Mom always does." I did the same thing. But I had another kind of variation on that. My mom would ask me before she did the shopping, what do you want to get this week? Because I'd already started doing Chinese cooking and things. And I said, well, anything's okay, just not cauliflower. I just didn't want to cook cauliflower. So what did we get?
You were right. 2 heads of cauliflower.
Just one, but it was cauliflower. I happen to like cauliflower, but at the time, that's what happened. So I realized that anything I didn't want my mom to do, don't mention it. Okay, let's go on.
Let's continue to our next sentence here. Next, the same group was asked to do the same exercise, but this time to think of white bears from the very beginning.
Now, we can think of a different dynamic going on here because of all my friends, I would say especially male friends, but I would say everybody, they don't like being told what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's literally what I was thinking. It's like, okay, sure. I'll think of a bear, sure.
Exactly. And I would like to say male, but like, for example, Wesley is a good example. Don't try to tell Wesley to do anything. He will find a way to not, this is not a criticism of him in the least. But he is somebody who really does not want to be told what to do.
Really? So does he have a problem with authority? Or do you think it's passive where it's just like, hey, I need you to do this. And he's just like, oh, okay. And it just doesn't stick in his mind.
No. Not the second one. It's authority.
Really?
It's a power thing. And that's why I think of men first, because they're usually kind of, fighting with each other over who has more power.
I agree to that to a certain extent. I really hate rules that are arbitrary. And nothing will irritate me more than being told no without a good reason. If you have a reason, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But don't tell me no because you just don't like it.
But I've always been that way myself. Yeah. So I've always been, I'm not going to do that. And then I made the same mistake with my son. Do this. Why? You don't need a why. I'm your mom.
Oh my God.
That did not go over well. It did not go over well. So that's right. We don't like being told what to do. So when we're told to think of something, we can think, they're probably going to think of white bears less than the group was told not to think about them because we're kind of rebellious.
Yeah, let's find out here.
Yeah.
Our next sentence says, it turned out that the participants in the first group thought of the bear far more often than the other groups who had been instructed to think of white bears on purpose.
So this bears out what we're guessing ahead of time.
Bears out. Hey.
It bears out. That was totally unintentional, but somehow it popped out. Okay, so it happens that when they tested it, they actually did an experiment. It was true. It was easy to not think about something when you were told to think about it.
So our next sentence says, Wegner coined the term ironic rebound to describe the process whereby deliberate attempts to suppress thoughts make them more likely to come to the surface.
Now, we have not been talking about each word in the sentence and all of the grammatical constructions, but they are really good. So after the broadcast, make sure that you go over the article carefully because you can learn a lot of things from it. Ironic rebound. Ironic, okay, it comes from irony. Irony means something that you didn't expect. You'd think that he's always saying, well, you should always be kind and generous to other people, and you ask him for a contribution. He says no.
Yeah,
all right.
No thanks.
Yeah, so it's ironic that somebody blah, blah, blah. So rebound is when something bounces back. And you use the term in basketball. I used to be a cheerleader. So you have a rebound when somebody made an error, and then you get a chance to throw in the the ball into the basket, so that's a rebound. A rebound means something comes back to hit you. And when you make deliberate attempts to not think about something, that's when it rebounds. That's when it comes back. And it's ironic because it's just the opposite of what we told you to do.
This reminds me so much of the Streisand effect.
What's that?
Barbra Streisand was a very famous singer. She's still quite famous. And there was this scientific group taking pictures of the California coast. They wanted to study it. But Barbra Streisand had a big famous house right on the beach there, and she didn't want people to take pictures of her house. Mm-hmm. So she tried to crush the scientific group.
Oh.
But it became so famous that she was fighting with these scientists that everybody went to go see her house that she tried to hide. So it was the opposite of what she wanted to happen. It's called the Streisand effect.
Okay, let's go on to our last paragraph. Over the years, behavioral psychologists have come up with a variety of methods to suppress the white bears, especially ones that may affect our lives negatively. They've made a jump here now in the last paragraph because they're no longer just talking about some random image that you may or may not keep in your head. Here they're talking about things that bother us, especially people who brood over the past, B-R-O-O-D, to brood over something. That means you keep thinking of it for no good reason. You just can't get the thought out of your head. So if you're somebody who broods about the past, you may need help to break that cycle and not think so much about the past. So here now, psychologists are trying to find ways to help people who are obsessing, thinking too much about something that's making them feel bad. Our last sentence, these include mindfulness and meditation, focusing on something else of interest to you, and assigning another time to think about the topic. Now, I already gave you an example of that last part. My son decided he'd think about it in the future. He is too busy now. And Chris has given us an example about thinking of something else. I don't know how of interest it was, but it was effective. He thought about nothing, and then he cleared out his head.
This last sentence also reminds me of the phrase, idle hands are the devil's playthings. That if you don't have something else to keep you busy, well, the devil will find something to annoy you with.
That's right. That will probably hurt you yourself. Let's go to our questions. 1, what is the passage mainly about?
A, the difficulty of containing certain thoughts, which is the correct answer, but I think we should look at the other answers as well.
B, subjects in a Harvard psychological experiment. No.
C, a Russian novelist and an American psychologist. Well, we talk about those things, but no.
They're not the main point. And D, a mammal that has traumatized people throughout history. Now, I'm sure a lot of people have been attacked by polar bears, but that is not the main point of the article.
That's
so
right.
The answer is A. Let's go on to 2.
Which of the following statements is true about the experiment in the second paragraph?
A, the result proved that it is easy to control your thoughts. No, it's not so easy.
B, the first group was forced to think of white bears on purpose. Well, in fact, it's the opposite.
It was the second group anyway. And C, participants instructed not to think of a white bear may have ironic rebound, and that is the correct answer.
D, Wagner conducted the white bear experiment before he read Dostoyevsky's essay, which is not true. That's where he learned about the idea.
So the answer is letter C. Number 3, what does the author mean by saying suppress the white bears in the last paragraph? And we talked about that just now.
A, think about bears of another color. No.
No. B, cause the extinction of polar bears. We did not talk about extinction of animals. We talked about extinction of ideas.
C, find a way to game the experiment, which means kind of like to cheat the experiment.
Right. That means that you don't follow the instructions so that you can get something that you want out of it, and so that you will win, maybe, even though you didn't follow the instructions. And D, minimize negative recurring thoughts. And that is the answer. That's what we were just talking about. And that will really get you out of a lot of problems if you're able to do that.
And lastly, number 4, according to the passage, who is most likely suffering from ironic rebound?
A, Greg has been having the same strange dream every night for over a week. The images haunt him throughout the day. No.
B, Tom's tooth was really bothering him one day. His mother told him to just think about something else and he would be fine.
And he ended up thinking about?
That's right. He thought about that tooth over and over again. This is the correct
answer. C, Sarah's stomach growled very loudly, making her realize that she was hungry. She went into the kitchen and made a snack.
And D, polar bears are Nadine's favorite animal. She has pictures of polar bears all over the bedroom walls and thinks about them every day. No, remember, she wants to think about it. She's trying not to think about it. That's the purpose of ironic rebound.
So the answer is B, and that is it for today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.